Everyone. I'm at Agboola. I am a alumnus of Penn State. I graduated my undergrad in 2019 with material science, and then again in 2020, as long as with material science through the accelerated master's program. And currently, I'm a Ph.D. student in applied physics and data science at Harvard. So currently, my research is focusing at the intersection of like biophysics and machine learning, and sort of what we're doing is we're screening millions of metal binding protein variants to build training data using microfluidics. And then we're using this sort of to screen the separation efficiency of these proteins for the processing of like rare earth elements, which are used in catalysts, batteries, magnets, what have you. That's what I'm currently working on right now.
Cool. My name's Nathan Banner. I'm currently a second year in the Ph.D. program for material science and engineering at Penn State. I also did a accelerated master's degree here, and I'm just currently working in Dr. Moni's lab in semiconductor research. So what my research really is it focuses on forming emic contacts to ultra-wide bandgap semiconductors. Presently, I've been working on a lot of AlGaN, which is aluminum gallium nitride. And this kind of serves as a bridge between well-known gallium nitride and also aluminum nitride. What's interesting about that is aluminum nitride was previously considered an insulator. Our collaborators have recently been able to dope it with beryllium and increase the hole concentration to where we can now it serves as an extreme bandgap semiconductor. So my project, I'm like I said, I've been working on a lot of AlGaN, but the future goal is to be able to contact aluminum nitride, and this can serve as a paradigm shift in the power industry, like for military applications, transportation, and energy. And aluminum nitride is really important because it can function under high temperature and high current operations. And we're funded through the Office of Naval Research. So that's pretty much a scope of what I do every day. So Matt, why'd you get into the accelerated master's program at Penn State?
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. I think I'd have to start back for some context, but I started at a branch campus, Penn State York, for about a year and a half, and then I moved up to University Park, and I joined the material science department, and in the material science department, there's a lot of collaboration between groups, outside of groups, and I got to experience that with my advisor, Mike Chung, for about 2.5 years, and the classes were great, but I feel like 2.5 years wasn't enough time to really soak in sort of that vibrant community. So I thought of continuing my research that I was doing during my undergrad that just felt incomplete. And with the accelerated master's program, this gave me a way to boost my credentials and dive deeper into the research I was currently doing, that I was doing as an undergrad, and help develop that further, which was in carbon fiber research. Yeah. And what about you, Nathan? Why did you choose the accelerated master's program?
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. I was on the same route. I did research in my undergrad, and I actually had I went to school at a branch campus, Penn State Du Bois, and one of my advisors I worked for there for research, he also had a lab at UP where we're at now. So I kind of got my feet wet in undergrad, and I wanted to continue working on, say, electrical contacts in graduate school. His funding kind of disappeared in that project, but I was able to find a different advisor to work with electrical contacts and semiconductors. So it kind of evolved, but yeah, I also felt like I wanted to do a little more research after my undergraduate studies. And the accelerated master's, it was really nice. I like to do, I guess, the hard work up front, and I was able to get all my classes done and still do research. And this allowed me to, choose, I could go to industry or continue for a PhD. So I like options, and that seemed like the best, route to go. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess how would you then describe your experience as a student during the accelerated master's program throughout? Because it's like 1 year, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so my experience, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about it. But for me, it was pretty difficult, but it was definitely worth it, I'd say. Like
Yeah.
my last year, I was super busy. I'd wake up at like 5:30 in the morning, go to bed around 11:30 at night. I did a lot of homework, went to a lot of office hours, did a lot of research. That
Mhm.
didn't leave me with too much free time for this accelerated program, but to really get 2 years done in one and really get ahead, I'd say it was a good experience. I like
Mm.
to get ahead early. So, but what do you think? How'd you feel about the accelerated program?
Yeah, yeah, definitely emphasis on the accelerated. And I think for both of us, we definitely had a key advantage because we did research in our undergrads. And so for me as well, I think that very much helped to like sort of segue into that accelerated master's program. And from taking material science classes from the undergraduate and then seeing some of the similar professors, new professors were teaching more advanced crystal chemistry, more advanced polymer classes. um, those classes were great, and so I think yeah, it's definitely a fast program, but I would say that during that summer portion, you can really have you really get the time to really dive in deep and into like what specific topic you're doing, and then again, you're still taking all these same advanced classes as the PhD students, right? And so there's a huge advantage there.
So, do you have a best experience while you were here at Penn State, or?
Mhm. Next experience at Penn State, I would say so. Since I was there for undergrad, had to be the blue and white football games. I don't know if you have you gone through those.
I haven't gone to the blue and white game
The
yet.
blue and white. Yeah, it's I really like the blue and white. All the football games are great, but blue and white is when I feel like the most amount of alumni come to Penn State campus, and during that time as well, there's career fairs going on, and so the Penn State campus is like super vibrant with alumni and current students, and so you have this whole mix throughout like that whole weekend of career opportunities, networking with fellow Penn State graduates, and then at the same time, um, you get Penn State football, which is what do we have the third biggest stadium in the world, I think.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, so it's just the electricity is great, and yeah, that was probably one of my best memories during Penn State. What about you?
To bounce on that, I tried to get into Millennium Science Complex. That's where my advisor's lab is at on a football game day, and I could not, for the life of me, even get into the campus. It was so busy. And
Yeah.
there's a rumor that the SEMs and the microscopes that when they score a touchdown at Beaver Stadium, that they actually vibrate and they.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'd say my best experience was this past December. I took my qualifying exam and I passed it, and because I had to switch advisors, my old advisor had knowledge on my research project, so he ended up being on my committee. It was just nice. It was a nice to for him to see the progress I've made over the past year, and it was just nice because he was proud of me and my work. And I'd say in my book that was a pretty good day to be able to show growth in that aspect. So
Yeah, congrats on passing your candidacy.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So
So I guess what made you choose to pursue a PhD and um, at Penn State? Because right after you graduate the accelerated master's program, you do have a choice. You could, go into industry, academia, maybe start your own thing, or what made you choose a PhD?
I'd say for the PhD in general, I really enjoy learning, and I really like leadership opportunities, and I think PhD has both of those qualities built into it.
Mhm.
In terms of Penn State, I was between a few different schools for material science. It came down to Carnegie Mellon and Penn State. I applied to Carnegie as well. I'd say the relationships I built over the last 4 or 5 years really helped me to make a decision to stay at Penn State as opposed to travel to Carnegie Mellon or anything. So I'd say relationships were my biggest thing. Why'd you choose? What influenced your decision?
Yeah. So after the accelerated master's program, I actually chose to go into industry. So it was a bit of a weird time. And I'm sure, and you were an undergrad when this happened, when the COVID-19 happened, and the outbreak, and the we had to quarantine and things like that. And so, the job market was a bit funky. It was kind of hard to find jobs around that August time, for like, January to August, when all of that was going on. And so I ended up applying to maybe 800 jobs, and it was really, really tough. But one thing that really came through for me was, Penn State Alumni Association and contacts. And so, since we have one of the largest, and a lot of our material science alumni as well are at some of the greatest companies all over the Fortune 500 list. And one of them that came out to me was Paul Corporation. And there's one alumni, Ruth Ann Wood, also an alumni from the Penn State material science. And she's also at Paul Corporation. And so there's other Penn Staters there too. So there's like little community at Paul Corporation, and there's thousands of employees. And so that was great to see that sort of the recognition and the networking to help with like the job search. And so that was my first choice. I didn't choose Ph.D. at the time because like I had to help my family out financially, so it just wasn't the time for me. But then after some time working in industry, I was like, okay, now like COVID was dwindling down, the economy was sort of recovering, it like really recovered. And so I then decided to start applying to programs, and glad to say I got lucky with Harvard University, and now working with David Waite's lab here. So
Now, what was it like coming from industry back to academia as opposed to going straight through? So, like, did you face any hurdles, like not wanting to go back, or like,
yeah, with coming back to academia, it's been interesting. I stayed real close to academia because I've been really engaged with some of the national organizations like ACS. So I've always been talking to professors here and there and organizing speaker events. But it's a bit different in terms of like I know exactly sort of what path I want to take, and what I want to do, and I wanted to try something new and go maybe towards the more like biophysics route and explore that. And so I came with some like ideas, and I'm sort of treating my PhD more as a way to first learn and explore, but at the same time maybe from my research, maybe try to spin out my own company, or like engage more with entrepreneurship. And so I saw PhD as a great route to learn, connect with many scientists, professors, as well as like de-risking your own idea through sort of that whole timeline. And so that's sort of why I chose it.
Okay. So like building off that, where do you see yourself in 10 years, 20 years down the road? Where do you want to be?
Yeah. That's a big question. The short answer is I don't know, but like I do have I hope to see myself I hope to see myself starting my own company. I've been inspired from mentors that I had in industry, as well as like founders that I've met throughout my short 8 months here at Harvard, and to see how they've started companies off their research during their PhDs. And it's a tough process, but like their stories are quite inspiring, of how they network, how they talk to investors, how they build their own team. And so I saw a lot of reflection in that while I was in industry, but it's more of a more early stage process. And so reflecting from their stories, that really interests me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you? What are your long-term goals after your PhD? Are you thinking about staying in academia industry, or? There's
So
many choices here. Yeah.
I'm in the same line with you. I'd really like to start my own company. In like particular, I'd like to have a forever company that really takes care of its employees and is like family oriented. So like your employees can take off and go to their kids' basketball games, football games, whatever. Because like
Mhm.
I don't think there's a whole lot of that anymore. Like that
Exactly.
company really taking into account their employees. So I'd really like to have a company that really like helps the community back where I'm from. And as far as like what company, I want to start, I've had a few different ideas. I think it's going to be really hard to, start my own semiconductor,
Hmm.
fabrication plant because to compete with Intel, you virtually like I can't like the amount of money you need to even start something like
Yeah,
that up is
exactly.
billions. So,
Hmm.
but I'd like to use the experience I learned in the lab. Like I could do quality control, like inspection analysis. We had a seminar speaker last spring that came in. He went from lab intern to owning the whole
Hmm.
company. And now he does like a quality, control business side where people send out their parts or whatever they need to get diagnostics done on
Yeah.
it. And so
Hmm.
that's interesting. And I've also been thinking maybe
Yeah.
like a thin films coding company or something along the lines where I can use what I've the skills that I've gained here.
Mm.
And then it's interesting because I've also had different mentors from undergrad and from working at my internships. I worked for a professional engineer when I was an undergrad. I had an internship, and he was an adjunct at Penn State Du Bois, and he really, answered all the questions I had when I worked in his office. Which sometimes that's hard to come by. Sometimes engineers don't really like to share all their knowledge, and
Yeah.
it can come hard. But he really helped me to really understand how the industry works, and so I'd maybe consider being an adjunct at a small college, or
Mm.
I don't think anything full time academia, but
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. Things can change, so things can
Yeah.
always change. But
It's
um,
so, yeah, it's so important to give back, and I've heard from one of my other mentors too that like mentorship is like sort of the cheat code to like advancing your career. So I wanted to ask, how has mentors played a key role for you? If you can dive more deep into that.
so I'm very specific about picking out people that I can count as a mentor and I can go to for advice, and that's in both engineering and in life in general. And I have a lot of people back home and a lot of people at Penn State now that they really encourage me. They really point me in the right direction. It's also really nice because like at MSC, like I work
Hmm.
with a bunch of different instruments on my project, and like I show up and like you can count on the experts in the field. Like for me, I do a lot of XPS, and Jeff Schallenberger, he's really good at XPS. So like anything I need to know, there's a good chance he knows it. And like
Hmm.
so, and like even bouncing back to Luke, who I was working on intern at his professional engineering company, like it's just really nice to be able to have someone explain the things that you don't know, that it isn't that hard to find out because he already has the answers and he can really walk beside you or you can walk beside him and uh,
Hmm.
really grow in that. But do you
Hmm.
have any what kind of mentors did you have in industry other than say your PIs that really helped you
Yeah.
to get where you are?
Yeah. So for me, yeah, mentors again, really, really important. Um, yeah, my mentors when I was at Paul and Danaher, it sort of it sort of spanned across the company. So there's, for most typical, an art company was like mainly focused on material science, but you have the R&D, you have manufacturing, operations, um, we had like strategic open innovation, sales, marketing. So like I didn't want to keep you know my my mentorship just closed with R&D and have that just a focus. And so I definitely made sure to seek out mentorships from some of those other roles. And so I had mentors from marketing and even sales, and that for those people who talk directly to customers. And so when I wanted to learn more about that process, even though I wasn't directly involved in it, I could go to them and ask those stupid questions, and get really keen advice about that. And so, like as well as we worked with companies um, and 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 also worked in the semiconductor industries. And so, hearing about those customers and how we develop our solutions and how that all sort of connect, it's sort of hard to see if you're still down at such a high resolution in R&D, but to see how everything connects. And so, I was lucky enough to get into this rotational program after I was an engineer at Paul, that we circulated different roles throughout the company, and I got to explore different R&D teams with chemistry and with membrane science, as well as our device team. How do we formulate, building our filtration devices, and then eventually as well with our strategic open innovation team, where I got to talk to startups, and draft open innovation contracts with them to see if we can do a material transfer or something like that, and test their products, and try to come up with sort of have that good alliance between us, so we can both launch a product, right? And so with that program, it was so helpful, and I think that program allowed me as well to help stretch, and seek out different mentors that I would not normally hear from, and they've been so helpful to me. Yeah.
So did they play a factor in you? Did you have early mentors on that helped you discover material science, or how did you really get into material science and engineering then?
One day I was walking on Penn State's what's that main road? Pollock Road, or I forget, but right outside of the Steidle Building, and I went in. I didn't know what was in there. I was a sophomore at the time, and then I walk in. It was just all this glass, and you see those on the second floor. You could see those. I think they use it to blast protons or something on that second floor, and they had all this cool equipment. I was like, oh, what's going on in here? And I saw, on the wall it says material science and engineering Penn State, and so I saw it was fascinating, and I've been wanting to get more into the engineering side instead of sort of running chemical reactions all day. And so I went into the academic office sort of randomly, and the first person I met was Meg Applenalp, and she ended up being my academic advisor once I formally joined the department. So that was cool. But she told me about all the cool research going on um, within the material science department at Penn State, and so I felt like there was a really close connection with chemistry and polymers, and so there were plenty of faculty at Penn State: Robert Hickey, Mike Chung, Ralph Colby. The list can go on and on. That were doing research, all types of research. Just within their groups, and then of course differently amongst them. And it was great to hear all about that. And I just went door to door to meet with them, because they're right there in their office. You can, their door's open. You just knock, and you can have a quick conversation with them about what they're doing. And eventually, that's when I knocked on Mike Chung's door too, and I asked him about what type of research he was doing, and he was doing things in carbon fiber. I felt really applied. Um, they were collaborating at the time with Oak Ridge National Lab, and I ended up joining that project, and that's sort of how the snowball effect and how I got started. And so yeah, I would have to give mostly credit to Meg. She definitely helped me out and help me guide me to help find throughout the material science department. So what about you? How did you get into material science, but I guess semiconductors? Because material science is core to semiconductors, but there's just so many other types of subgroups in material science. You could have gone the polymer route. There's glass, right, with John Morrow.
Yeah.
What excited you about semiconductors and going that route?
To back up a little, I had a similar experience to you where my old advisor, my old PI, walked me through Millennium Science Complex, showed me the basement where all the characterization instruments are at, and I saw a bunch of people in white lab coats, and in these small rooms, and they looked like really clean rooms. Everything's white, it looked really cool. So that kind of caught my interest. But I'd say in terms of material science, I had an internship my first year of undergrad at Webco Industries in Oil City, and I was able to work one-on-one with a metallurgist that graduated from Penn State as well. And that
Nice.
kind of greatly influenced my decision of what to do and that I want to do material science. But for semiconductors in particular, my senior like capstone project, or I don't know what they call it nowadays, but I did electrical contacts. And so I had my resume out there for the accelerated master's program, and Dr. Suzanne Moni reached out to me, and she's like, "Hey, I've seen you worked on electrical contacts. Have you thought about working on semiconductors?" And I'm like, "Not really," but then I toured her lab, and it was really interesting with the clean room and how you can evaporate metals or sputter metals, and I was really interested in metallurgy, and so we look at the reactions that happen between the metals when you deposit them via e-beam or sputtering. So I'd say that's kind of how I got hooked on semiconductors, is just by Dr. Mooney reached out, and I was somewhat familiar with electrical contacts, but then it grew as as the semesters.
That's cool.
So,
that's cool because seeing that, being inspired, and then when you were like, after you saw that, you were inspired from what you saw and who you talked to. Once you actually started the program and you're in your second year now, is it like sort of what you expected? From from what you're inspired by, like the whole PhD program. Like
yeah. So I'd say, I guess it's give and take. In general, when I came to the PhD program, so I came from a small high school, a smaller college, so I expected to be, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I expect to be one of the best. Like I thought I'd be at the top of my classes and have cutting edge research. And I guess the biggest lesson I've learned is that I'm not the best, and I can always improve on the theory and learning anything, I guess, in my research interest. And so in that way, I got humbled a lot when I came here, and I expected it to be different, but that's the reality, is that we're working with peers, and that's why we say with, because it's hard to get above one another. But what did you expect versus how it really went when you got into your program?
Yeah, I would have to say pretty similar to your answer. I severely underestimated the learning curve again. Same thing. I was like, oh, I went to Penn State, top material science program, and I did a master's and spent some time in industry. So I thought that I want to go and learn something new, that it wouldn't take too much time. But I definitely underestimated, the learning curve, and just accepting that, and knowing that that things will take time, and not to rush a PhD. A PhD is still a marathon. Coming from the accelerated master's program, things are moving quickly. You end up sort of finding your niche, in that program maybe, and you're taking a lot of advanced classes. But the PhD, the pace slows down all of a sudden. It's a different race. And so the PhD is definitely, I'm realizing it's a marathon, and I need to take my time throughout the program, and just soak it all in, because you're only going to do this once, really. So
no, I agree with you. I think I started taking it a day at a time, and that's all I know how to do. So
I wonder, did you see yourself doing a PhD, and when you were like a kid growing up, did you see yourself being here? Were your expectations matched, or
I guess when I was really young, I always thought I wanted to be a mad scientist, in the sense that I had like a science kit, or like one with test tubes. I was interested in that when I was really, really young. But I guess this didn't come till later, when I was probably in my senior year of undergrad, and I started to, I'm like, wow, a PhD would be cool, but it was something that was really far out there. I'm like, I don't know if I can tackle that, but it'd be really cool if I could. And I guess coming step by step, I've been able to, try and get closer to that. But yeah, I don't think I saw myself getting a
Hmm.
PhD when, I was younger. What about you?
Hmm.
How did things change, or how did things, evolve?
Yeah, it's definitely, things evolved over time. I think it was like a slow, steady pace. And I remember back, I think, when I was really young, I just wanted to be like a track star. I wanted to be a runner. That was my whole thing. But then in high school, I had a high school chemistry teacher, Mr. Mallory, and he really inspired me and showed that like science is really fun and doesn't have to be, you know, and math too, and it doesn't have to be this burden on you, and so he made science fun for me, and I wanted to explore that more. And as I developed, I went through engineering, but yeah, I didn't see myself doing a PhD. I just thought that science was sort of cool, and um, the more I did it, the cooler I thought it was, and so I guess that's how I progressed through it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting you bring that up, because in
Hmm.
high school, for me, I had a chemistry teacher, Mrs.
Hmm.
Misery, and her chemistry class, it honestly, it got me through chemistry in college. She taught a really good
Hmm.
class, but in her
Hmm.
class, I always write Dr. Banner on my papers I turned. I don't know why. I didn't even know,
Oh,
what a
what?
PhD was, or
Yeah,
but, it was just
that's
one of those
cool.
things we
Hmm.
carried and goofed around in her class. I mean, she
You
taught a really
manifested.
good class, so and then it's interesting how things evolve, but. Um,
Now we're in this, we're both in prospective PhD we're in PhD programs. What advice would you have for undergraduates specifically who are thinking about doing a PhD? Um, Especially undergraduates at Penn State too. Or in general, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I'd say my advice to current, undergrad students is to really reach out to faculty about getting involved. Like, I really like how you said you went door to door knocking on, the professors' doors, and they were there. That was nice.
Mhm.
I think that is a really good approach to, getting involved and seeing how they can help. Like I said, I
Mhm.
started research in undergraduate studies in my second year, I think, and that evolved into where I'm at now. And I think those connections are really important, that you do undergraduate research. And I'd say in like short terms, I think the quality of your life is determined or defined by the relationships you have. And I think it's really
Mhm.
important to have good relationships and show up on time. And if you tell a professor you're going to work in the lab and do it, then you should probably
Mhm.
do it. And I think they'll have a lot of more respect for you if that's what you do. So, but yeah, I'd say relationships are the most important thing. I'd say to focus on. What do you think? What would you tell a undergraduate student?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, relationships are super important. Reaching out to professors that you're at schools that you want to apply to, or at your current institution, and developing a relationship. The ones in class too. Just getting an A in the class and asking for a recommendation. Um, you're not going to get that in-depth recommendation that you might need for a PhD program, especially since like I think the number of applicants are increasing year over year for graduate programs, and I can imagine even more at Penn State, um, material science. And so that's super key. And then one other thing, and this is also something you said earlier, was engaging with the community and giving back. I think is also um, um, is super important. And like don't limit yourself to to whatever um, immediate program that you're in, but it's okay branching out, and it's okay giving back, even if you're an undergrad. There are high school students, or maybe that you can give mentorship to from the things that you learned. You know, just because you're an undergrad doesn't mean you don't know anything, but there's always someone else, who's maybe shooting for your position or has aspirations for the position that you're in, and I truly think there's always a way to give back, and through mentorship or through teaching or however. So I think that's super important as well. Yeah.
maybe a last close-up question. So what kind of hobbies did you develop, or what, like, more than your career, more than, the PhD, what other stuff do you do, like cool
Yeah.
experiences or hobbies or
Yeah, yeah. So after I graduated from with my master's, I moved to New York City, and being in the city is super vibrant. There's so many people, so many things going on, a lot of opportunity. Um, and one thing I retook up was music. I played the drums and the trumpet when I was younger, and so I like rekindled that fire in New York, and I joined a band out there, and it was cool playing. And I found out that I really enjoyed it, and it felt like you know it was low stakes. It wasn't anything serious. It was just like a bunch of friends, like just playing and messing around. And sometimes we'd find gigs here and there, and that led me to continue that during my PhD as sort of like this side thing where it's like it's a way to like decompress away from
yeah.
school. But yeah, but what about you? What are your hobbies that you do
I I'd,
now
s-
as well?
I I'd say my way to kind of decompress is I like to play basketball. Back in high school, I scored 1,000 points. I really liked playing basketball
Wow.
when I was younger.
Hmm.
So I'd say basketball is my way to decompress.
Mm.
I'm really involved in a local church back home. I like a youth ministry, and I'd like to start a Christian youth camp down the road, maybe
Cool.
as
Yeah.
like something to do with, if I have a company and a way to
Hmm.
support a Christian youth camp. I think that'd be something really interesting, and that's my faith's really important to me, and I'd say
Hmm.
that's something that I'd like to do. So.
Awesome. Do you go over to the IM building to play like that? To go like nice. I
Yeah,
did that too.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
great.
I guess at a branch campus is a lot smaller, obviously. Here at the IM, there's a ton of people always playing basketball.
Yeah.
And it's not hard to get into a pickup game. So
It was great chatting with you. Yeah.
yeah,
Good
no,
to hear all the cool stories. Yeah.
yeah, no, this is great. It
Hmm.
sounds like you're you have some really interesting research, and yeah, it was a pleasure to, chat about it.
Exactly. You as well.